A dog can tell the truth too late. Brix refused the clean lane with less than 7 minutes left in the extraction window, to first Emody. He did it without drama, without a bark, without any of the noise civilians expected from fear. His weight dropped backward. His nails clicked once on the wet concrete and stopped. The collar ring tightened under Rowan Vale's fingers like a small metal warning. Sodium light glazed the lane ahead in a pale yellow sheet, clean from wall to wall. Washed so recently the water had not finished crawling toward the drains. Rowan had seen dogs refuse blood, fire, rot, and bad men with calm hands. He had never seen one refuse emptiness. Jace Marin took one more step anyway. Because Jace still believed a mapped route had more authority than a dog's locked shoulders. Rowan caught him across the chest with one hand and pinned him there. The move was harder than it should have been. His shoulder pinched under the old scar tissue, a private little punishment for trusting speed. "Don't," he said. Jace went rigid against Rowan's arm. "That's the route. That's the problem." Salt came over the fence with the diesel and the old cold stink of cranes. The yard was supposed to be waking before dawn, full of small, ugly sounds that meant work, not safety. Tires should have hissed. Chains should have complained. Men should have cursed at machines that did not care. The clean lane gave him none of that. It held a blank quiet that felt built, not lucky. No tire mist drifted across it. No chain dragged wrong. No fresh footprint broke the wet shine. A working yard always leaked something human, even when everyone inside it pretended otherwise. A perfectly clean lane was not a gift. It was maintenance with intent. Brix angled his head away from the opening, breath tightening, body still set back from the wet strip. Rowan did not give him a command. He touched the collar ring once, just enough to tell the dog he had been heard. Jace looked past Rowan's shoulder, eyes jumping between the lane and the time on his phone. The screen threw a weak blue flash over his face. 6 minutes and change, he said. If we miss this window, the yard resets. Rowan kept his eyes on the emptiness. It already reset for us. A container moved after he stopped. Not before, not while Jace was walking. After no, the steel groaned deep in the row to their left. A slow, stacked sound that passed through the wet concrete and into Rowan's bad shoulder. A lock clanked overhead, then another, spaced like knuckles on a table. Water jumped in a thin line across the lane where Jace would have stepped next. Nothing appeared in the clean lane. No man stepped out. No light snapped on. That made it worse. Someone had waited for the refusal, then answered it with movement. Brix's ears flattened, then came forward again. His nose worked once at the air, not toward the open lane, but across it, cutting the empty path in half. Rowan felt the old lesson move under his ribs. Correct could become useful to the wrong man. He had learned that with a different dog, a different dawn, and one civilian guide whose name still arrived before sleep, when Rowan was tired enough to be honest. Jace swallowed. Mechanical drift? No. Rowan let him go, but kept his body between Jace and the lane. A crane doesn't wait for a dog. The next clank came softer, almost polite. A signal without a signature. Rowan backed Brix 2 steps from the mouth of the clean lane and shifted them toward the darker edge of the yard. Not entering, not retreating, only refusing the shape that had been offered. It cost him speed. It cost them the official route. It gave whoever watched him the first piece of him, and he hated that more than the clock. Jace saw it then. Not all of it, but enough. His face changed in the sodium wash. You think this was set for you? Rowan looked at the wet lane, the too even shine, the empty space waiting like it had manners. I think somebody knew what a handler would correct. Bricks stopped breathing hard for 1 second. Then the dog's head turned toward the far end of the clean lane. Past the washed concrete and into a stack that should have carried only metal and salt. His nostrils widened. His mouth closed. The refusal changed shape in Rowan's hand. Not fear now, not proof, but pressure. A faint sound followed, thin and human, swallowed almost immediately by a moving wall of steel. Not a word. Not a cry. A live trace, close enough to be real and far enough to be useful to someone else. You. Rowan tightened his grip on the collar. There, he said. The clean lane stayed empty, boat, patient, and wrong. Jace looked where Rowan pointed and saw nothing at first. That was how the yard protected itself. Steel made distance look simple until it moved. A horn coughed somewhere beyond the clean lane, low and tired, and the thin human sound vanished under the noise. Jace lifted his phone again, thumb moving too fast. The system has that row green, he said. Normal transfer, legal movement. Rowan kept Bricks off the washed concrete and let the dog work the air from the darker edge. Legal isn't clean. Jace's jaw flexed. That distinction is going to get both of us arrested. Better than loaded brang. The answer came out flat, not brave. Brave was a word people used after they had run out of details. Rowan had details. Water drying in straight lines. Steel answering his stop. Bricks refusing the lane and then pulling past it, not into it. The live trace had not come from where the yard wanted him to go. It had slipped across the clean lane like a hand waved through smoke. Jace showed him the screen, a tidy green bar over a place that had just made a human sound. The bar did not care. A warning strobe began to turn at the far end, painting the wet concrete red and then yellow and then red again. The movement Jace called legal changed shape. A forklift rolled out from between stacked containers, slow enough to be innocent, angled enough to matter. It crossed behind a parked hauler and stopped where it forced Jace to step sideways. The first shove of danger came with no raised voice. The machine simply took away the safer foot of concrete and made the official route smaller. A hard crack folded through the steel, somewhere beyond the forklift. The container edge beside Jace spat a bright fleck and rang like a struck bell. He flinched into the open before his training caught up with his pride. Not a collision. Not an announcement. Pressure, applied where a cautious man would move. Bricks snapped his head toward the sound, then away from it, nose lifting toward the opposite shadow. Rowan saw the handler problem at once. Noise on one side, pressure on another pressure. Scent dragged through a third floor. Somebody had built a disagreement and set it loose. A man in a reflective jacket stood near the forklift, face half hidden under the hood, one hand low by his thigh. He did not look at Rowan. That made him worth watching. Men who wanted to scare you stared. Men who wanted to measure you looked elsewhere. The spotter shifted 2 fingers, and the forklift eased forward another yard. Move left, Rowan said. Jace obeyed, late and angry. The left side gave them a line into the visible lane. And that was where the yard offered them the first obvious human being. Evan Sloan stumbled out under the strobe with his hands bound in front of him. Jacket soaked dark across one shoulder, mouth open around breath he could not seem to finish. He was shoved from behind by someone Rowan could not see. Pushed just far enough into the lane to be seen from the clean route they had refused. The staging was almost insulting. Evan was real. The blood on him was real. The pain bending him forward was real. That was why it worked. Cheap bait did not bleed correctly. Good bait made decent men run. Evan looked toward them with the wild focus of a man who had been hurt past bargaining. Help, he got out, or maybe only shaped it. Jace moved before thinking. Rowan caught his sleeve this time, instead of his chest, and pulled him back behind a parked chassis. "That's him," Jace said. "That's Sloane. That's what they want you to say. He's bleeding. I can see that." Rowan hated how cold it sounded. He hated more that it was necessary. Bricks did not drive at Evan Palm. That was the fact Rowan trusted and did not like. The dog's body sharpened, breath going tight, but his pull cut away from the visible lane. Off-angle toward the place the forklift had blocked and the spotter had never looked. Evan swayed under the strobe, displayed like an answer. One guard kept him visible. Another watched past him. That was the wrong care. Professionals guarded what mattered. They displayed what hurt you. Rowan felt the correction waiting inside his own muscles, the clean, heroic line every witness, every officer. Every decent part of him wanted to take a run to the visible man. Break the lane. Save what was placed in front of him. The man behind this had counted on that decency having a shape. Jace breathed hard beside him, anger and panic fighting for the same space. The spotter in the reflective jacket tilted his head, still not quite looking. The forklift's engine idled. Another steel impact snapped somewhere down the row, close enough to make Bricks flinch against Rowan's leg, then recover. Rowan looked at the visible lane and understood the cruelty of it. The enemy had shown them a man because good men move toward the shown thing. "He's bait," he said. Then Bricks pulled once more in the wrong direction, toward something the yard still refused to show. Bricks pulled once more in the wrong direction, away from Evan and the visible lane. Toward the place the yard had kept blank. Rowan went with him. He did not like it. Liking had never been part of the job, which was one of the small lies men told themselves when the job started using their better instincts as bait. The collar ring dragged hard against his fingers. Bricks's shoulders flattened, then rose, his breath going tight and fast as he cut across the wet concrete. The dog was not guessing. His nose took the air in short checks, then locked on a line that slipped behind the forklift's engine stink and the washed lane's fake cleanliness. Live stress. Human. Recent. Rowan felt the truth in the dog's body before he had room to name it. The trace moved through the yard like heat under a door, thin but alive, carried sideways by salt air and diesel haze. "He's got something," Jace said, too loud. "Keep up," Rowan said. He moved before the fear in Jace's voice could turn into a question. The route broke ugly. A low hauler blocked the obvious angle, and the forklift sat behind them with its engine idling like it had all morning to be harmless. Rowan did not take the space offered. He cut behind the hauler, Bricks close to his left knee, shoulder-brushing cold steel as the yard pinched them into a narrow run beside stacked containers. His bad shoulder gave one warning pulse and he ignored it. The live trace sharpened for 3 steps. Bricks drove forward, not frantic, not cute, all working pressure and muscle. Rowan read the cue cleanly. The dog had found a moving human source, not Evan, not the displayed answer under the strobe. Correct. That should have steadied him. Instead, it put a hard, cold line through his ribs. Correct was how a man lost time when the other side knew what correct looked like. A sound broke from the row ahead, too soft to be machinery and too brief to be useful. Then steel swallowed it. Jace hit a puddle behind him and cursed under his breath. Rowan heard distance lying to him and kept moving anyway. Rowan committed. That was the punishment built into training. You did not ignore a valid dog because the world had become inconvenient. He angled right, taking the faster cut along the container wall. And Bricks matched him until the collar line changed in Rowan's hand. The dog's pull broke for half a second. Not stopped. Not lost. Rewritten. A container shifted ahead with a deep metallic groan, closing off the line Bricks had been reading. Another moved beyond it, hidden but heavy, dragging the live trace away after Rowan had already chosen. The source had moved. Not before the alert. After, that was the trick. Rusk was not reading Rowan's mind. He was measuring how long a trained handler took to trust a first live cue. Then moving the source after the correction became expensive. Correction. Rowan felt the timing snap shut. He had been fast, and fast had been counted. The man in the reflective jacket was gone from the edge of the lane. But his absence had the same shape as the clean lane. A radio clicked somewhere in the steel May. The voice that came through was calm, close, and not speaking to Rowan. He still trusts the dog on first truth. Then the channel died under static and engine noise. Say Saul. Jace heard it, and Rowan could tell by the way his breathing changed. As if the sentence had reached inside his official world and unplugged something. Bricks shook his head once, frustrated by the shifted line, then searched again with the sharp, offended concentration of a dog whose truth had been moved out from under him. Rowan touched the collar. He did not waste breath on comfort. Bricks needed the next decision to make sense. A flash cut the dark at the far end of the run. Hot metal snapped off the container wall near Rowan's shoulder and skittered across the concrete solve. Jace dropped hard behind him. The shot did not solve anything. It bought pressure. Rowan pushed forward, because backward had become a cleaner trap. His shoulder was already late. His hand was already angry. The yard gave him the new constraint in steel. To their right, a container row slid inward, narrowing the run they had taken. To their left, another stack shuddered, locking away the wider exit. The gap ahead stayed open only because it wanted him inside. Bricks lowered his head and went quiet. Rowan felt the walls beginning to close. Behind him, Jace said his name once, but the metal took it apart before it reached the end. The clean path was gone. The visible lane was behind them, and the next mistake would happen at arm's length. The gap took them the way a throat takes breath. 1 second, Rowan still had a line of retreat behind him, wet concrete shining under the sodium lights. Jace's shadow broken across it. The next second, steel shifted on both sides, and the space narrowed into a hard corridor that smelled of rust. Diesel and old heat. A hard crack snapped through the container wall behind them. The wall rang beside Rowan's head, all vibration and insult. Bricks pressed close to Rowan's left leg, collar tight, body asking for room the yard refused to give. The dog could not swing wide, could not cut across, could not get angle without putting himself under moving steel. Rowan felt the limitation through the leash before he saw the man. A shape detached from the broken light ahead, not rushing, not posing. Just filling the gap at the distance where clean movement stopped being useful. The operator wore yard colors over a worker's shape, but he carried himself wrong for labor. Weight forward. Hands low. Eyes on Rowan's right side, where the old shoulder had already started sending its dull report. The man had not guessed that weakness. He had read it, or someone had. That was the first honest compliment Rusk's team had paid him, and Rowan would have preferred cash. Rowan did not wait for ceremony. Ceremony was for courtrooms, graduations, and other places where people pretended order had won. He stepped into the pressure before it finished closing, bringing Bricks with him just enough to keep the dog clear of the sliding wall. The operator moved at the same time. The first contact hit Rowan through the shoulder and into the container behind him. Pain flashed white and mean. His grip almost opened. Bricks snarled once, low and tight, but the sound folded under the echo and came back from 3 directions. Too tight. Too loud. Too much metal. Rowan kept the dog back with the leash and his hip, not because Bricks was useless, but because drive without angle became danger in confined steel. A half-second mistake in that space would get dog, man, or both crushed into the wrong motion. The operator used the hesitation. He crowded Rowan's weak side, forcing Rowan to choose between losing balance and letting the shoulder take more damage. Rowan chose damage. It was not noble. It was simply what remained. The container wall shuddered against his back, and the vibration climbed his spine like bad news. The fight became ugly and small. No clean distance. No heroic line. Breath, steel, damp fabric, the scrape of boots losing bite on wet concrete. Rowan worked by feel. Pressure came in. He gave a little and made it expensive. The operator drove again at the shoulder, and Rowan's arm answered late, a fraction behind where it used to be. That fraction mattered. It put heat down his side and a sick looseness into his fingers. A flash broke behind the operator, white and gone. Steel took the impact somewhere overhead and returned it as a shower of rust and noise. Bricks flinched against Rowan's leg, then recovered, nails skidding as he lunged forward just enough to break the operator's rhythm. Not enough to reach him. Rowan checked him with knee and leash. That half-beat saved Rowan from being folded into the wall. He took it, turned the man's force into the container edge, and heard the operator's breath leave in a flat grunt. Rowan followed with the only kind of control the gap allowed, hard enough to end the immediate threat. Restrained enough not to waste time making a point. The man went down against the steel and stayed there, coughing through his teeth. For 2 seconds, Rowan could hear only his own breathing and Bricks's tight, angry panting. Then the yard returned in pieces. The forklift idling behind them. The strobe washing the visible lane, washing followed to where and dot to do. Evan's ragged shape still under too much light. Jace somewhere back in the choke of steel seal, saying something Rowan did not catch. Rowan flexed his right hand and felt the grip come back wrong. As if the nerves had to vote on it. His shoulder throbbed in a deeper place now. Not a warning. A cost. He touched Bricks's neck, quick and practical, and felt the dog trembling with contained drive. Easy, he said, though nothing was. The gap had done its job. Distance was gone now. Rusk's team could force the world small whenever Rowan corrected predictably. He looked past the downed operator toward Evan and saw what the fight had nearly hidden. The guards around Sloan were wrong. One kept him visible, not protected. Another watched the lane beyond him, not the man himself. If Evan was the prize, they were careless. Rusk had not been careless once. Rowan tasted rust at the back of his throat and understood the next ugly question before Jace could ask it. Why would a professional team display its prize and guard the space beyond him instead? Rowan moved toward Evan because leaving a bleeding man under a strobe was not restraint. It was theater with better excuses. His shoulder argued with every step. The fight in the gap had left a hot line down his arm and a loose, stupid weakness in his grip. Bricks came with him but not straight, which told Rowan more than Jace's tight breathing behind him. The dog's body stayed sharpened, head cutting between Evan and the dark lane beyond him, breath short. Attention scattered by too many live smells and too much diesel pressed under the salt air. Evan swayed in the visible lane, bound hands held low, jacket wet and dark across one side. One guard kept him displayed. Another kept watching beyond him, past the man everyone was supposed to run toward. A strobe flare exposed Rowan for half a second, hard and naked. And a steel edge snapped behind him from another impact he did not look back to admire. The visible lane made courage look simple, which was how it became dangerous. "What, Rowan," Jace said, "we cannot leave him there." "I'm not." Rowan crossed the last stretch of wet concrete before the strobe could turn red again. Evan saw him coming and did something small that saved his humanity from the trap built around him. He did not simply beg. He turned his bound hands sideways and shoved his own body backward into the guard's line. Not enough to break free, enough to spoil the angle for one ugly second. The guard grabbed him hard, and Evan folded around the pane without making it clean for anyone watching. Rowan used that second. He closed the space, put his body between Evan and the lane beyond, and dragged him down behind the low frame of a parked hauler. Bricks came tight to Rowan's knee, then checked away, nose lifting over Evan's shoulder, and past him. The dog took Evan's fear and refused its neatness. Evan breathed in pieces. Not me, he got out. Maybe? Or maybe Rowan heard what the pattern had already told him. Blood smell clung to Evan, real and sharp. Fear rolled off him in waves. Real bait worked better, because real pain moved honest men. Still, Bricks's pull kept breaking toward the place the guards cared about more. Jace dropped beside them, face hard with the kind of panic-trained men called responsibility. He's alive. We stabilize him, call shore, lock this section down. No. Rowan checked Evan's restraints with one hand, not working the knots, not pretending they had time for clean answers. He shifted Evan's shoulder out of the light and shoved a loose strip of torn jacket under the man's forearm to keep him from sliding back into the moat. Open. Protection, not rescue. The distinction tasted bad. His shoulder pulsed when he released him, reminding Rowan that every useful motion now came with interest. He's bait. Jace stared at him as if Rowan had finally become the kind of man procedure had warned everyone about. Evan's eyes found Rowan's for half a second. Then they flicked away, not at Jace, not at Bricks, but past the visible lane toward a darker run where a warning light had gone dead. His bound hands twisted once, two fingers digging against the restraint, pointing with pain more than intention. She, Evan rasped. The word was almost nothing. It still changed the weight of the yard. Jace went still. Voss, he said, and put too much guilt into one syllable. Rowan did not ask Evan to explain. A wounded man under a strobe owed him breath, not a deposition. He pressed Evan lower behind the hauler frame and looked at Jace. Keep him alive for 30 seconds. That is not a plan. It's a lease. Bricks's collar pulled under Rowan's palm, not toward Evan, not cleanly toward the dead warning light, but through a messy band of smells that made the dog's breath roughen. The visible lane had shown them one suffering man and dared them to become decent in a predictable direction. Rowan looked past Evan again. The farther guard had not moved closer to protect him. He had drifted back, guarding space, not flesh. Somewhere behind that space, steel knocked once, then settled. The sound came from beyond Evan, where nobody was supposed to be worth protecting and still moving. A thin trail of wet dark marked the concrete where something or someone had been dragged across it earlier. It led away from the visible lane into a narrower strip between containers, where the air held old iron and sweat under diesel heat. Bricks lowered his head, interested and wrong-footed. The next route had announced itself without kindness. Blood on concrete, old enough to be useful to a patient man. Rowan tightened his bad hand on the collar and knew the yard was offering them the blood lane. The blood lane took shape as Rowan approached it. Less a place than a bad decision the yard had saved for later. The wet dark trail ran between two stacked walls of containers and spread where heat had worked on it, thinning the edges, thickening the smell. Old blood, old sweat. Diesel laid over both like a dirty blanket. Bricks hit it hard. His body dropped, shoulders driving forward, nose low, breath chopping. For one clean second, Rowan felt the old faith try to return. The dog had something fixed. The dog was giving him truth. Then the truth came wrong. Bricks fixed on the stain, not the lane beyond it, not the moving air above it, not the pressure that had made Evan point away from himself. The collar snapped tight against Rowan's injured hand. Pain flared up through his wrist and into his shoulder. A flash popped beyond the visible lane. Steel answered with a flat ring, and Jace ducked toward the wrong shadow. "Tell me that's current," he said. Rowan did not answer fast enough. That delay was the trap. Rowan knew it while he was still inside it, which was a special kind of useless. Bricks's cue was real. The dog was not lying, not confused in some simple civilian way. Blood had been here. Sweat too. Fear had soaked the narrow strip, human and sharp, layered into the hot metal and wet concrete. But the air above it sat wrong, consorted, heavy. Dead-ended. No fresh lift, no broken movement, no living pull beyond the first ugly hit. Rowan crouched enough to read Bricks, without putting his face into the story Rusk wanted him to believe. The dog's focus skipped, recovered, then skipped again. His ears flicked toward a sound Rowan could not place, because the steel gave it back from 3 directions. Echo made the lane feel populated. Smell made it feel urgent. Timing made it false. Rowan touched the collar ring. Not praise, not correction, just contact. "Old," he said. The word cost him. Bricks shook once, hard, as if trying to throw the residue out of his own head. Overload did not arrive as stupidity. It arrived as too much truth at once. Jace had moved during the hesitation. Not far. Far enough. The warning light behind them cut out, and the visible lane changed without asking permission. One of the guards near Evan shifted away from the bait and toward Jace's exposed side. Another dark shape crossed the opening behind a container row, using the bad acoustics as cover. Rowan saw Jace realize it a heartbeat late. The planner's official brain had been busy counting roots and injury and impossible responsibility. Rusk's men had been counting the same delay Rowan had just given them. "Back," Rowan said. Jace took one step and stopped, because the forklift had rolled silent enough to matter. Blocking the way he had used to enter. No crash. No drama. Just steel, rubber, and bad timing. Jace lifted both hands instinctively, palms open, as if reason still had jurisdiction. Rowan hated that gesture. It belonged in offices, hearing rooms, command trailers. In the yard it made him look available. A hard crack folded through the containers. The wall near Jace spat sparks and forced him toward the blood lane. Bricks tried to pull forward again, then lost the line in diesel heat and old fear. Breath rasping harder than Rowan liked. The overload became physical. Bricks's head cut from the old stain to the forklift, from the forklift to the echo of boots, from the boots to the invisible space beyond the lane. His body stayed ready, but the readiness had started to fray. Rowan felt it through the leash, through the slight tremor in the collar. Through the way the dog needed one clean second, the yard refused to give him worry. Rowan's shoulder throbbed with his pulse. His trust did not break. It bent, which was worse. He could not obey the cue blindly, not anymore. He could not punish Bricks for giving the truth the world had left for him. The blood lane had done its job. It had stolen seconds, and made those seconds visible to every patient man in the yard. Jace stood half-cornered between the forklift and the container wall, face pale in the warning glow. One hand going toward his phone, with the look of a man about to spend the last official thing he owned. "Rowan," he said, voice trapped flat by steel. "If I open that window, Shore will know." Rowan looked from Bricks's straining body to Jace's blocked route, and understood what the delay was about to cost. "Then make it count," he said. Jace's thumb hovered over the phone, and Rowan saw the choice taking shape, before Jace finished making it. The forklift blocked his back route. The container wall pinned his left code. The warning glow cut his face into hard pieces, making him look older and less official, which was probably the most useful he had looked all night. Bricks shook beside Rowan, not from fear, from too much pressure stacked into one animal body. His nose kept trying to solve the blood lane, and failing, then cutting toward the blocked space beyond Jace. Then snapping back toward a distant sound Rowan could not place. A muffled impact came from somewhere deeper in the yard, soft and human under moving steel. Not Evan. Too far from the visible lane. But the sound made Jace look up. It made Rowan's shoulder tighten before his hand did. A flash cut low across the gap near Jace, then disappeared. Steel took the impact and threw noise back at all of them. Rusk had split the pressure cleanly. Jace in the open. The hidden movement slipping away. One man displayed. One person still being moved. No clean hand to play. Rowan stepped toward Jace, and in that same second, Brick shoved hard against his thigh, blocking the easiest line. The dog did not know the plan. He did not know Rusk, or Mira, or the cost of Jace's badge. He knew pressure. His body hit Rowan just below the bad hip angle, weight low, collar tight, breath scraping. Rowan checked the route Bricks had blocked and saw the trap half a second late. The wet concrete there looked open, but a container shadow was moving across it from the wrong direction. If Rowan had taken that clean angle, he would have been pinned between Jace and the steel before he could move either of them. Good, he said. Too low for anyone but the dog. Bricks trembled harder and stayed there. A Rusk operator crossed behind the forklift, using its bulk to cut Jace's remaining space into pieces. He did not rush. That was the point. He made Jace choose between the phone and balance.
Jace heard the step and kept looking at the screen anyway, because bravery sometimes arrived as administrative suicide. "If I burn this," he said, voice flat, "Shore sees my access stamp. Internal Review sees it. Coast Guard sees it. I don't get that key back." "You wanted movement," Rowan said. "Buy me some." "That is not how keys work." "Tonight it is." Jace pressed the screen. Nothing dramatic happened at first. That was the insult of systems. They ruined lives quietly, with a vibration in the hand and a line of text no one else could hear. Then the yard changed. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. A warning alarm began somewhere high and cut off after 2 beats. Hydraulic pressure sighed through steel. One container row ahead slowed while another continued moving, not stopped, only mistimed enough to open a short, ugly chance. Jace looked almost sick with it. 90 seconds before someone notices that was me. They already noticed. Rowan moved as he said it, catching Jace by the back of his jacket and yanking him out of the pocket between forklift and wall. The forklift lurched a fraction, not enough to crush, enough to claim the space Jace had occupied. Is less than #0. 5# is greater than. The operator behind it reached the empty spot too late. Jace hit Rowan's bad side. Pain ran down Rowan's arm and took 2 fingers with it for a moment. He kept his grip anyway. Across the yard, behind the moving rows, a woman made a sound that could have been breath or refusal. The intercept was there for 1 clean second, and then Rowan chose Jace because dead allies did not open windows. The clean intercept vanished. Rowan felt it go, not as a thought but as a physical loss, like a door closing against his ribs. Brick surged forward, then checked himself, body still angled away from the route Rowan wanted. He was overloaded, strained, but still giving pressure instead of certainty. Rowan accepted the insult and the gift. Jace staggered beside him, one hand still wrapped around the phone. Screen now dark, except for the afterimage of what he had spent. "There," Jace said, pointing with his chin because his hand would not come up. "Rows 3, 4, and 6. are slipping out of rhythm. Rowan did not need the numbers. He saw the effect. Steel walls that had been separate began lining their shadows into one narrow, temporary throat beyond the blood lane. The air changed under the diesel is less than #0. 4# is greater than fresh. Fear, not close enough to name, moved inside the forming space and was gone again. A container lock hammered down. Another answered. Less than 7 minutes, Rowan thought, though the thought came without comfort. The sixth stack was beginning to form, and whatever waited inside had already cost them the clean way in. The sixth stack did not appear like a place. It assembled itself out of timing. Rowan watched the moving steel line up in pieces while the yard shook under his boots. And Jace's burned window bled seconds somewhere behind him. One row slowed. One row kept sliding. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than one row, answered late, closing the wrong gap and opening a worse one. The shadows matched before the containers did, black bars tightening across wet concrete. Brick stood pressed against Rowan's leg, breathing hard, head low. Still carrying the blood lane in his body and trying to work past it. His cue came broken now. A pull, a check, a hard swallow of air, then a body angle toward the forming space. Not proof. Not location. Recent movement, maybe. Fresh pressure under diesel, maybe. Enough to make Rowan look at the timing instead of the stain. Is less than #0. 5# is greater than. A hard crack hit the row ahead, and a bright spark snapped off steel where the obvious opening had been. Rowan did not enter there. Sight had just lied politely. Jace's voice came behind him, strained and thin. That window is dying. Rowan flexed his injured hand. 2 fingers answered late. Perfect. The night still had jokes. He understood the sixth stack because he stopped trying to make it a destination. The sixth stack was the temporary lane created. When 3 moving container rows lined up around a live human source for less than 7 minutes. Not a map mark. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. Not a hidden room. A condition. A brief piece of geometry built around breath and movement, useful only while the steel stayed in the wrong agreement. Say it too slowly, and it was gone. Enter it too early, and it crushed your options. Enter it too late, and the person inside became cargo again. Rowan saw why Rusk had needed him. Not to find a place. To verify timing. Bricks had given refusal. Truth. False truth. Overload. And now this strained half-pressure that said something living had passed through the forming space recently is less than #0. 5# is greater than. Or was being forced through it now. Or had left enough fear in the air to make the difference dangerous. That was all. That was plenty. Rowan touched the collar ring. No clean answers, he said. The steel moved again, and Rusk compressed the lanes without showing his face. Rowan could feel the man's presence in the pressure. A row shifted where it should not have shifted. A container lock dropped with deliberate weight. The visible lane behind them lost its line of sight to Evan. The blood lane cut off at the rear. The clean lane might as well have belonged to another night. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. Jace cursed once, not loud, as his damaged access kept one part of the yard from sealing too soon. I can hold that delay for maybe a minute, he said. After that, Shore gets the whole flare. Let her. That is your plan. No. Rowan watched Brix's head turn, not toward a person, not toward a heroic answer, but toward the moment the 3 rows would align tightly enough to enter. That's the bill. Brix leaned forward and then stopped, body shuddering with restraint. The dog was not telling him where. He was telling him when. Rowan had punished himself for years over late truth. Now he had to spend himself on one that was not even clean. He went when the vibration changed. Not when the opening looked safest. It never did. Rowan stepped into the forming sixth stack, with bricks tight on his left, and his bad shoulder close enough to the steel to feel heat coming off it. The space closed behind them in increments, each movement small enough to deny intent and heavy enough to remove choice. Jace's voice flattened behind the containers, swallowed by the echo. Somewhere ahead, a woman's breath caught and disappeared under metal is less than #0. 4# is greater than bricks pulled once, stopped, then angled right, without committing. Rowan followed the angle, but not blindly, reading the fresh fear under diesel, the broken rhythm of locks. The way the steel seemed to invite him toward speed. Another impact rang behind him, closing the thought of retreat. Rusk wanted the correction. He wanted Rowan to be good in the same old way. So Rowan slowed inside the trap, giving up the clean line before it could be used against him. The last open strip of wet concrete disappeared behind a sliding wall. No clean exit remained. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than ahead. In a cut of broken light between two rows, a man stood waiting where the pressure came together. The man in the broken light did not move when Rowan entered. That was how Rowan knew it was Rusk before he had the face. Stillness in a shifting yard took discipline or arrogance, and the better ones used both. Rusk stood where 3 container rows made a temporary room out of bad timing, his jacket dark, hands visible. Body loose enough to be dangerous. Behind him, somewhere inside the heat and echo, a woman dragged in one hard breath. Mira, not visible enough to save cleanly, is less than #0. 4# is greater than, not hidden enough to ignore. Bricks pressed against Rowan's leg, trembling under strain. Then angled left with a rough check that stopped before it became a pull. Rowan felt the ambiguity through the collar. Movement had happened there, or would happen if the steel stayed open 2 more beats. Rusk watched the dog, not Rowan's eyes. "First truth brought you in," he said. No speech, just the cut. Rowan kept his bad shoulder close to the steel and gave Rusk nothing useful in his face. "You lost your lane," he said. Rusk's mouth changed almost into a smile. Almost was enough. Rusk moved first by making Rowan want to correct. A container lock dropped behind Rowan, loud enough to turn Bricks's head. A shadow crossed right, deliberate and sloppy, pretending to be the route. Bricks checked toward it, caught pressure, hesitated. Rowan's old pattern rose in his muscles. Read the dog. Fix the line. Take the clean angle. Rusk shifted half a step before Rowan chose, already waiting where the correction would carry him. Rowan saw the board then, not the pieces. Every honest cue had been turned into tempo, is less than #0. 4# is greater than. Every refusal, every alert, every delay had taught Rusk how fast Rowan trusted, how far he moved. Which body he saved first. The clean correction was a leash, and Rusk held the other end. A hard crack folded through the 6th stack. Steel barked beside Rowan's head, and Bricks flinched against his leg before forcing himself back into the work. Mira made another sound, closer to pain than words. Jace's burned window groaned behind the walls as steel slowed a fraction it should not have slowed. Rusk glanced at that sound once. He had counted Jace too. Rowan used that fraction to do the first wrong thing. He did not correct. Rusk's counter came immediately. A second operator moved behind Mira, half seen through the slice of broken light, using her body as pressure without making her a shield for a speech. Mira's bound wrists shifted. She drove her shoulder sideways. A small, ugly movement that spoiled the operator's grip and bought half a step of unplanned space. "Now," she breathed, or maybe she only pushed the word out of pain. It was not testimony. It was survival. Rusk heard it and moved to punish the same opening Rowan saw. Another flash cut across the tight space. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. The wall rang hard enough to flatten sound for a heartbeat. Rowan gave up position instead of taking the clean rescue line. He stepped into the ugly center, exposing the side Rusk expected him to protect, and let the false root die without feeding it. Rusk committed because even patient men hated a pattern that stopped mid-sentence. He came in fast, clipped, direct, using Rowan's shoulder as a map. Pain hit before contact finished. Rowan's grip weakened. Bricks surged, checked, then shoved not toward Rusk, but into Rowan's thigh. A hard body pressure cue that said now more than where is less than #0. 4# is greater than timing, not place. Rowan took it. He dropped his weight under the next steel shutter and drove sideways, with bricks tight enough to clear the moving wall. Rusk's hand caught fabric, not balance. Mira appeared in the slice Rowan had bought, wrists bound, face gray under grime. One knee folding as the lane tried to take her back. Rowan caught her with his bad arm and nearly lost everything. Pain blew white through his shoulder. His hand opened, closed, opened again, late and useless, until he forced the fingers around cloth. Bricks hit the space between Mira and the closing steel, not attacking, blocking just long enough for Mira to fall toward Rowan instead of the wall. Jace's window held for one more ugly second. It sounded like a dying machine refusing to admit it. Rusk adjusted because he was good. That was the part that made him dangerous, and the part that finally cost him. He reached for Rowan's next clean move, the backward pull toward the opening. Rowan did not give it to him. He pushed Mira down and away, sacrificing the last easy exit, and turned into Rusk's pressure instead of out of it. The impact drove them both into hot metal, is less than #0. 4# is greater than Rowan's shoulder. Failed halfway through the motion, but his legs and Brix's weight took what the arm could not. Steel shifted. Jace's stolen delay ended with a hard metallic answer that split the cell apart. One operator was sealed behind a shifted row. Another dropped to the wet concrete when the wall took his angle away. Rusk fought to recover the tempo and found none left. Rowan used the broken rhythm, drove him into the container edge, and held him there until the man's stillness became ordinary. Mira coughed once behind him, alive. Bricks stood shaking, muzzle wet, eyes blown wide from effort. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. The sixth stack settled around them, ruined as a trap. Rusk's cell was broken. Somewhere beyond the yard, the root that had fed him kept moving. Morning did not arrive clean. It leaked into the yard in a gray wash, showing what the lights had hidden badly and what the dark had hidden well. Wet steel steamed in places where hot metal met cold air. The broken strobe still turned without purpose, red over puddles, red over torn plastic, red over Brix's ribs moving too fast. Rowan sat with his back against a container, and Mira, on the concrete 3 feet away, is less than #0. 5# is greater than, wrapped in a jacket that was not warm enough. She was alive. Evan was alive beyond the hauler frame, pale and shaking while 2 port workers knelt near him and tried to look useful. Without asking questions they did not want answered. Rusk lay face down with his hands secured behind him, no longer still in the interesting way. His men had been pulled apart by steel and timing, not by justice. Justice would have arrived with paperwork and clean sentences. This was only aftermath, wet and noisy and underpaid. Rowan touched Brix's collar ring and felt the dog flinch before settling. "Easy," he said. Brix breathed through it, tired and wired, still listening for a yard that had stopped trying to lie for the moment. Jace stood near a dead work light with his phone in his hand. He had the posture of a man reading an obituary that used his job title instead of his name. Shore's people had arrived late enough not to save anyone and early enough to own the mess, which was about how authority preferred it. Annika Shore spoke to him once, low and hard. Jace did not argue. He turned the phone so Rowan could see the gray lock across the access screen, then let his hand fall. Is less than #0. 5 hash is greater than revoked pending review, he said. That was fast. They build the gallows before the bridge. Rowan tried to stand and changed his mind when his shoulder sent a private report that included profanity. Jace looked at him, hollowed out but not empty. Worth it. Rowan looked at Mira. She had her eyes open now. She was watching the space beyond Rusk, not the man himself. As if her body still believed the route could restart. Ask me when everyone has slept, Rowan said. Jace gave a short laugh with no humor in it. So never is less than #0. 3 hash is greater than. He put the dead phone away, like it weighed more than metal. Mira spoke once, barely above the cooling metal. He had another name for the next handoff. Rowan did not ask for it like a cop. He did not let Jace turn toward her like a man desperate to buy back his clearance. Mira was not a filing cabinet with a pulse. She had been dragged through steel, fear, and timing by men who made people into route markers. Rowan only nodded to show he had heard. Evan was carried past them on a stretcher board, made from whatever the workers had found first. His bound wrists had been cut free. Is less than #0. 4 hash is greater than. He turned his head toward Mira, and she turned hers toward him. No speeches. No gratitude shaped for cameras. Just 2 living people recognizing the awful luck of still being separate bodies. Bricks tried to rise when Evan passed and failed halfway, front paws slipping on wet concrete. Rowan caught his harness strap and eased him down. Not your shift, he said. The dog leaned into his knee, shaking with spent drive. That was the part nobody put on posters. The dog did not save everyone. The dog paid attention until it hurt, and men kept calling that loyalty because guilt needed softer clothes. Luis Mar appeared from behind a damaged cart, small inside an oversized rain jacket. Though not a child young enough to be useful for anyone's redemption. 12, maybe 13. Old enough to understand adults had broken something, and young enough to expect one of them to admit it. He looked at Bricks before he looked at Rowan. That alone made Rowan like him a little, against policy and better judgment. Is he hurt? Luis asked. Concrete. Good. The world improved briefly when someone asked the right-size question. Rowan rubbed 2 fingers under Bricks's collar where the skin was hot. Yes, he said. He'll live. Luis nodded, as if that answer had weight. Then his eyes moved to a container being towed at the far edge of the yard. One nobody seemed ready to care about yet. A fresh paper tag flapped from its rear latch, half-soaked, letters bleeding but readable when the wind caught it. Halifax relay. Jace saw it too. So did Mira. No one made a speech. No toast rose out of the morning. Rowan tightened his hand in Bricks's collar and watched the next route leave under ordinary daylight. With gulls screaming unhelpfully above them,